discussion about.
We're live now.
We are live now, okay, we're back. I can't think of anybody else to have in on 180. If anybody here has someone they want to hear from. But, I just want to get a sense of where the committee is. Are you ready to have you put that on as possibly both? Senator Chitty.
I'll also say a few things. I've really gone back and forth on this bill. I go to Tim Ash when his advice when I first got in this role. He said, with every bill, ask yourself what problem you're trying to solve. And it's not clear to me what problem we're trying to solve with this question. I could support it if it was clear to me that benefiting the credit unions is aligned with some sort of state policy. I just haven't seen that argument yet, and I don't even know that it actually will. And so then I go to, if this could potentially reduce our tax revenues as well as our community reinvestment funds, then I'm hesitant to just jump right into it. And the question I'd have for the chair is, I think JFO testified, but have they done a fiscal note on it? And could we ask for a fiscal note? Because that would give me more confidence in feeling where I am.
Yeah, we could ask for a fiscal note. I don't know that they can give one because it all depends on how many credit unions qualify. And the treasurer's department didn't think that anyone would. The state employees credit union, now that it's merged, is the largest in the state. He said they were just babies compared to.
And I think they also said that even if they qualify, they'd be less likely to invest in them than they would in larger banks.
Yeah,
But I don't think we could get a note from JFO because that in effect involves forward thinking and almost an economist approach, which they don't do.
Right, I mean, it's a hard one to do. I think I felt better today hearing that it's probably not going to be a devastating effect on banks because credit unions aren't. I don't want to do anything to jeopardize Opportunities Credit Union because I know they are a community-based one. As I said, they're the only ones that would finance mobile homes. And they've always done that, so.
I guess I personally, I could either talk to Joe Bergeron myself, or we could have him back in the witness chair, because I had assumed that when we were talking about state funds, that was sort of a range of things besides the actual state of Vermont money that the treasurer administers. I thought that meant there's just more flexibility in wastewater and regional investments, et cetera. So I just want to make sure I understand the intent fully, because I didn't.
Okay, so we want to know, I'm trying to get these questions stacked. What funds are involved? Because you seem to think that this was also municipal funds, pension funds.
Well, when the deputy, who was that? Deputy treasurer. When the deputy treasurer said they've put a small amount in opportunities, they've used opportunities for a wastewater project. It seemed like it was never going to be the totality of state funds that even went to a smaller bank than TD, but that it's useful for smaller projects, and those smaller projects could use opportunities, or they could be using, New England Federal. I think understanding better the difference between our one community development credit union and the value of creating more opportunity for other credit unions seems to be the question.
Okay, so, Brandon.
Well, one thing that occurs to me is that if we went ahead with it, we would be creating a situation in which one group of firms is paying taxes to the state, and one group of firms is not paying taxes to the state. And I would sort of ask myself, why do we want to add to the group of folks who aren't paying any taxes to us that in effect reduces the amount of revenue that the treasurer gets? The job of the treasurer is to create revenue from the money that's invested.
Well, I mean, they themselves said that they do have some relationship with opportunities, which, I just want them to have the choice. A credit union then might be able to give them some other benefit or put some other proposal out there that is attractive.
We haven't heard what proposal it might be, we haven't heard.
That's why I want Joe back.
To suggest if there's any.
Yeah, what we heard was that the credit unions are very limited in what they can invest in. And in fact, there's limits, because you've got to be a member to get a loan, and I'm thinking that sounded like it was ripe for some abuse. And then he said, but there are limits even on how much they can loan. And I don't think, these aren't state funds that we're loaning for the banks to invest. These are monies that are sitting there waiting to be spent, and the two banks he talked about give us the banking services.
Mhm.
They send out the checks, they keep track, they keep all the paperwork. And we won't be getting this kind of money once hopefully interest rates go down. And as that said, it's used to be $1 million. We just, it was decimal dust, and this year it was $90 million. And that was the interest, that won't be there when interest rates, go down, but it's a significant amount of money to the state right now.
I think people choose credit unions, like your son, like me, because often they can extend a little bit more to provide access to capital to people who are not quite as bankable. So Yankee Farm Credit, for farmer, opportunities. I got good data from Joe that credit unions keep track of their, investment in underrepresented communities more than the banks. And I think that's a value. That's, a service that extends beyond tax credits and huge transactions to, individual Vermonters who have a little bit more access to credit for homes and businesses.
But I think what they said is none of those small credit unions could qualify.
Well, opportunities.
Even opportunities is there because the state needed, for some reason, a credit union in which to bank their money for a revolving loan fund for state water sewer plants. But they aren't putting, they haven't got a whole lot of money, and they wouldn't, because opportunities can't provide the banking services that they.
I have no doubt that whoever sits in the treasurer's office will make the best decisions for the huge amounts of money we're talking about. I just want to hear more about, small pockets of investment that could be diversified a little bit more, and people, state funds could have more choice that are much smaller than the actual huge cash flow we're talking about.
I think these funds are just sat there until the state uses them. These are committed funds. So, as he said, some of the pension funds will sit there until they sell into the pensions. I don't know, and maybe that's the question we need to ask, is can, say banks use state funds to loan, I assume be a loan, but to use it to invest that in a project. I'm trying to find out.
Yeah.
Can you seem to be talking about the smaller folks, if we put state money in there, would be able to finance projects at a smaller level. I'm not sure this is money we're putting in to be used to finance projects. I think that's something we need to know. Anything else we need to know? Keisha, do you have a credit union you'd like to hear from?
Could be opportunities, because we know they are a community development credit union,
But that's not what's at play here.
and well, taking the words community development are, so.
Yeah, so
Does that mean
we're taking our
Right.
community
You
development.
have Vermont, like you said, Vermont federal, Vermont state employees, and New England federal. Are probably the other three big ones.
Good point. I mean, if we take this away, we take the business that's currently with opportunities and go to like bigger credit unions, is that what's at play here? Yeah, okay.
Now I'm
That would be my concern. And the chance that it's going to go mean, Opportunity is just doing this one project for the state. Because it does reinvest in, for some reason, I guess A and R didn't. Well, I don't know why they put it there, but, they're not holding a large amount of state funds. This is a revolving loan fund, so they're just managing the loan and putting it up.
Right.
I don't think they're making the decision as to who gets the next loan. That I'm sure is being made by the state.
So to me, it's fine just to hear from Joe again and make sure we understand who this impacts and where this came from. Because I guess I just thought we were talking about smaller funds than just, you know, our entire state budget.
I don't think we're talking about this is just enabling language, so some of the budget
Right.
might go to credit unions, but I agree, it is unclear to me why credit unions who deserve this potential cost and sacrifice tax revenues and less monies in CRA, what is this aligned with our state policies, profit and support of credit unions?
But what I heard, and maybe, some of you may have heard it different, what I heard from, the deputy treasurers, the likelihood is nobody's gonna go there anyway.
So here to.
Yeah, we are parking state money that is committed for. We're gonna spend it out over the next year. It's in the budget. So we put it in our savings account in the bank. In return, this bank gives us a very good rate of interest. And he says there's only, what is it, 600 billion? That only TD and MT, I don't even know what MT is. MT can give those kinds of credit. So we let the credit unions in. The treasury didn't think there'd be one that could meet that criteria. They might meet the criteria to hold the short-term CDs. But there is a risk of loss of tax revenue if the credit union do this. And credit unions, according to Joe, are very limited in what they can do. They can give better rates to their, and I've been I got online, couldn't find it. I'm probably gonna have to call and find out if my local community bank and my credit union are significantly different. If I can describe an A1 mortgage applicant, I got 90% down, good credit, what rate would you give me? And see,
Right.
The difference,
Yeah.
significant difference.
I mean, no offense to Chris and others, but I've always been a credit union person because big banks fail, big banks prey on people. We did it, envision a world where Wells Fargo would be compromised. We have a president who's talking about all kinds of overdraft and junk fee, that the bigger banks charge, and they're asking them to stop doing that. So, I haven't heard any major issues with TD Bank. M&T, I think, just bought out People's, or that's how they entered our state. We end up with these mergers where we have huge banks, and they're buying good actors right now. But I always like to know that there's a diversity of choice out there. Should these banks get too big, to be good players in the economy?
I mean, credit unions can also get very big and have issues. We had savings and loans that had lots of issues. I don't know if this would solve that problem. We have some pretty big credit unions which get some pretty, I remember the discussion was sales tax, and I can't remember us removing it. And when they were building the state employees credit union, there was a fair amount of talk about the state is losing all that sales tax revenue because they don't pay it and banks do.
And one thing I'd say to that though is that you have less risk with scale. So when you have a bigger bank, they can handle the state's mass, and I think that was the point made by, that's why we're not gonna go credit unions many times.
Mhm.
There's more risk associated to it. I'd also just say, it seems like this is scope creep for credit unions, and they were originally designed to be members of local communities with
Yeah.
all sharing the costs.
That's where I learned
Cost
that.
capital.
Still.
Now they're dabbling into the banking industry, and I think what I would say is when you start crossing those regulatory lines, you get more unexpected consequences and exposure to risk. So when credit unions start dabbling outside of their original intended lane in their nonprofit space, one would be maybe reduce tax revenues. But this is,
Right.
again, I'm on the fence. Here we go.
What happens when it,
Other place.
when a huge bank is found to be, predatory, and we have ethical issues with that large bank? That has happened with Washington Mutual, Wells Fargo. I mean, it could easily happen with M&T, who I don't know that much about, and T Bank, which is now gigantic.
It could, it's Canadian. It could also.
So maybe they're a little nice.
It could also happen to credit unions. I mean,
You
that's
just hear
why
about
we
it.
have banking and insurance who
Right.
runs a pretty tight check on this solvency. We have a mechanism, but
Banks have shares,
banks,
credit unions have members.
and they have members. But a lot of money goes somewhere. Okay. Senator Bray, how are you thinking on this?
I'm following the lead here on this one. I was actually thinking about surcharges when I came back from the.
That was the other discussion.
Yeah, I know, the other side. Well, and it's because it's weighing on me, because we're looking at ongoing, you mentioned surcharge, for instance, in response to something like a flood.
Yeah.
And there's gonna be an ongoing need for significant investment to help us manage better floodplain, river corridors, wetlands and things. And it's one of those things where you can look, each big event costs $600, $700, $800. Are we being penny wise, pound foolish? And okay, but pennies, there's some pretty big pennies, maybe 40 million a year. How do you come up with that money in a year where we're hearing about constraints? And so when you mentioned surcharge, that got me starting. And a surcharge on whom?
Okay,
What's the
well,
nexus?
this one we are talking about surcharges, I would think.
No, sorry, I was going back to the earlier discussion.
I mean, they said they made $70 million in interest on those deposits. Plus whatever, yeah, I mean, we made 90 million on interest this year. That's brought it up to a significant, the economists are watching it. It used to be 1 to 2 million. It was
Yeah.
decimal dust in the whole budget. And the treasurer has to get the best return on the public money that they can. So they pretty much said they can't see any credit union being able to qualify because they just don't have the capital and the backing that, and the ability to provide the services that the banks can. There is a certificate of deposit program where the states put a 3-month CD in. That credit unions might be able to handle. But I think they said there's only one bank that could compete in that area too.
I mean, rate of return is great, but I'm thinking, guessing that the first check mark you have to get it, that it's a secure place that we go.
Yes.
Risk management.
They do a lot of that. Senator McDonald,
Oh, I go with the underdog. Not a. More competition you have, the better, so what's the dog boy afraid of?
okay,
Some people are too young to know what that means.
some of us are. You're next. See if you can beat him.
Said what?
See if you can beat him at being enigmatic.
Well, I'm told that the word fisk is more obscure than I thought it was. No, I've already spoken. if I wait an analogy, this is not the same stuff, but it's an analogy. What a lot of us do is want, socially conscious investment. Beth Pierce kind of ran the thing. And she said, our obligation is to taxpayers. And it was actually with pension funds. So our obligation is to the work. And we've got to take, we are responsible for large amounts of other people's money. And that we have to put that very high on the list. Having said that, and I've said this earlier, most of what we spend doesn't turn a profit. Government does stuff that needs to get done. And then if there was a profit, we leave it to the private sector. So mostly what we do are financial losers because they're socially important. And so for me, the question is, I don't mind subsidizing credit union because I think they serve an important social function. And if some of the money goes there, subsidizing might be the wrong word, but the idea is that if the only criterion is what's the best deal for the taxpayers, probably I'd say stick with the banks. But I don't think that should be the only criterion. What I need now is to get out of the abstract and figure out how much better a deal do the banks actually give us? And how much of a better deal do the credit unions actually give people who are, who don't do as well with the banks?
I think we heard there were only two banks, not the banks in the state. There were two. And again, the treasurer is, has a fiduciary duty to get the best return on the people's, this is money we've spent. If it gets lost, our budget is in big trouble.
Yeah.
So it's not money that we're giving to banks, I don't think, that they can then use to fund projects. We're parking our money there until we need to spend it. And Chris, do you know an answer to that? Can banks reinvest our deposits, or are they kind of just static?
I think you have to look at what the treasurer's offering is, as he said, 3, 6, 9, 12 months.
Yeah,
And whether that is being parked there because it is the state's cash fund that's gonna be used. Or is it an opportunity to leverage other dollars, knowing that it's always a liability on your balance sheet, that when the CD comes due, you're gonna pay that
right.
CD back to the state.
Okay, so that would be, I see CDs as different than just parking the money for the budget or the money that we've collected for pensions, which we then pay in one fell swoop, which would be, different there. So we need to ask the treasurer exactly what can banks do with the money he parks there. I'm gonna take Chris and then Randy, you look perturbed.
Oh, wait.
Okay.
Well, exactly to the last thing you were just bringing up, like, okay, if we, the Senator McCormick's question about what other benefits might there be. So I don't know what, if we were to deposit money with credit unions versus private bank, if there's any other benefit that comes by virtue of them having that money, like they leverage it in some way that supports community development, or not, I don't know. If we're just looking for rate of return, or we're looking at how they might use more money in their system, on their balance sheet, to do other things that would deliver the benefit in the
Okay.
community, like a
So
loan program.
that would be a question then. Can banks use the state deposits? Or what, and I suppose, what do they do? And Chris,
Well, like any financial institution, whether it's credit unions or banks, you're gonna lend out the money to your communities and borrowers to make it work for your institution, because that's how you generate income as an institution. So that's why you leverage capital to put it back into the marketplace with your customers, which in mutuals are also owners of the institution.
Okay, so you do use that money to leverage other money.
As long as there's, I have not personally seen the offering from the treasurer. So as long as there's no limitations that they put on that offering, it's part of the capital source that institutions would lend out in the marketplace. Again, knowing you've got a liability coming due in 3, 6, 9 months or whatever the term is
Okay,
for that
so be
month.
for two. Joe, do you wanna take a seat? What we credit unions do with that money?
As Chris said,
Just introduce yourself for the record, because you haven't been on this record too.
again, the black coat is Joe Bergeron, President Association of my credit unions. You're running late today. I thought you were
Oh, no.
We have a hard
This
stop at
committee goes
4:30.
late.
on this issue, you're running late today. Same as Chris said, a financial institution that is taking funds on deposit from anybody, be it a business, a consumer, or a governmental unit, is going to have to weigh how long do I have those funds in my possession as a liability? And that's going to determine what I'm going to be able to do with those funds. So I'm not going to put out X amount of dollars from the governmental unit that I'm holding for 3 months in a 30-year mortgage, unless I'm offsetting something else of shorter term equal value. So, the management of the balance sheet is not going to be any different from one financial institution to the next, or the financial institutions we're all talking about.
But most of what you do is in lowering rates for your members, or you could do some community investment if it involves members.
It's going to vary. So yes, all funds, all deposits that are in a credit union are going to be looked out to members of that credit union. I know there was some discussion earlier about field of membership of a credit union. Some are very narrowly defined. And that's the way credit unions started in 30s and 40s, very narrowly defined, not because the law limited it to that, but because in an age when there was no internet, there was no email, and so on and so forth, the easiest way to get a financial institution off the ground was to be doing it among people in a captive audience. So employees of ABC companies, school teachers of ABC school districts, so on and so forth. Since then, because of the popularity of credit unions, more and more people approach credit unions and say, hey, can I join this credit union? Can you expand your field of membership to my town? I'm so-and-so on the select board of ABC town, and so on and so forth. And so credit unions grow over periods of time, also because of mergers. There's been lots of consolidation of financial institutions. That's what I referenced earlier today. New England Federal and BSECU merged at the beginning of this year to form the state's largest financial institution domiciled in the state.
So you should.
I'm not worried is the wrong word, but my question, if you take away that community development credit union, will it be likely, since the state just almost testified that it's unlikely the credit union is going to earn many of the deposits or the business, that the credit unions aren't going to take much of the business, will this, taking this language away, very likely redirect or lose the business for the community development credit unions, where the bigger credit unions are now going to earn that because they're just larger scale? Do you have unequivocal support from the community development credit unions for this change?
There's one community development credit union, yes.
Okay.
There's, what we're really talking about is not, all the discussion earlier, what we're really talking about is not the overall business relationship that the state of Vermont has with those larger banks, TD and FET. For all practical intents and purposes, what we're really talking about is that Bank of Vermont program, in which the treasurer has currently somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 million. And that's what,
Okay, so
and it's not that we are seeking that, but that's, from the treasurer perspective, that's what the treasurer is looking at.
okay, and I think that's what we heard, that would probably be a scale
In there.
that you could deal with, so
Right.
maybe we could write it that way.
If the treasurer had his druthers, his or her druthers, in an perfect world on paper, maybe there wouldn't be a Bank of Vermont program. If you're looking to maximize return of the dollar, they're going to be putting those dollars, where they get the greatest return. It's going to be like you heard earlier from Jeremiah and, TD Bank and M&T Bank because you have a broader relationship than just investments with those institutions. It's all the transaction business and everything. But somewhere along the line, the treasurer's office wanted to earmark some amount of dollars to go to on deposit in Vermont institutions within the state borders of the state of Vermont. And that's how that Bank of Vermont program was created and why it was created.
Okay. So that may be a good way to approach this and, we can talk about that. Maybe more at the level that credit unions can comfortably have and not have to provide the banking services to the state. But we get it with big banks.
Well, let's not forget, I think the same holds true for all of the banks in the state of Vermont that are domiciled in Vermont. You know, the big entities that I have a relationship with are out-of-state institutions. They're not in Vermont. And you can have, or this building can have a discussion about where state funds should or should not reside, out of state, whatever. But that's not, you know, what we're trying to, we're just trying to bring up that, hey, there are, you know, a handful, there's been lots of consolidation. And there's a handful of banks that are chartered under Vermont law and that are domiciled in Vermont, be they federal or state chartered. Same thing for credit unions. There are more credit unions than there are banks in the state of Vermont. The largest institution domiciled in the state of Vermont is a credit union. 68% of the population is a member of a credit union. Isn't it time to, you know, have, if you're gonna have a program investing in Vermont institutions, why should it exclude some?
Question is, should the franchise tax apply to credit unions for deposits?
No.
Why not?
Because the franchise tax is a form of corporate tax on corporate profits is what it would normally be for the corporate tax. And credit unions do not have profits. They're not corporations. So all of the dollars that credit unions generate revenue, like Chris was talking about, the interest that you generate off the car loan that you made or the mortgage loan or whatever that you made, after setting aside required amounts, maybe a cushion on top of that for required safety and soundness purposes, are going to go back to all of the people that do this credit, all of the depositors and all of the borrowers.
Well, aren't they
Better
very much the same shareholders of the corporation? They're the owners of the business.
Democratically
Why would they be
controlled.
differently? Why do they?
It's a democratically controlled institution like any other cooperative out there. So if you're going to talk about changing the tax structure for credit unions, then you need to be talking about it at the federal level as well. And they'll be talking about looking at the tax structure of other cooperative entities under Vermont law and federal law too. Because they're all structured the same way.
Okay. I think we've heard what we need to hear. Yeah. And thank you.
Thank you.
Committee, do you want me to have the treasurer back?
That's fun.
Yeah. Thanks for hearing it.
That's fair.
Yeah. We have new treasurers, new officers. Not the same ones we used to, but, yeah, I trying to remember who the drafter on this is. I think it's Maria. But we can find out and ask Maria to come in. Maybe we can do some language tweaking.
That's it, and just be the Banking Vermont program.
Yeah. I think that will be great. Give a little bit of help to credit unions. That's what something we can do. Okay,
Ask you to change the title.
change the title.
Don't call it Bank of Vermont.
Oh,
We would find that offensive.
you would find that offensive.
And if you're only talking about like $89, then you will lose tax revenue.
Okay, yes, we will.
If that's the pop. You will lose tax revenue.
Okay, yeah, the
But that's your public
credit
policy.
unions get the things. And
How much tax revenue are we talking?
We don't know.
we don't.
You don't know.
As the treasurer said, they would probably weigh that as a pro and con of their
But
their trade.
Yes.
So if I may, you heard earlier today And I also got a discussion with my teacher too, that total bank franchise holders will receive $13-14 million per year. That's on all deposits of all banks to which bank franchise tax applies. And just the community banks in Vermont, so the ones that I was talking about, really, not the out-of-state banks with deposits in the state, but just the community banks are in the $7 to $8 million neighborhood in terms of deposits to assets free. And so if you do the number crunching and crunch it down, and if you have $13 million of bank franchise tax revenue on $7 billion, you can extrapolate what that would be on $80 million. And we're not talking about moving $80 million from whatever number of community banks. Well, it's probably very few community banks right now. It's TD Bank, as Richard and I testified to. So I think we're talking about a very small dollar amount that is, inside like 74, offset easily by the efforts of credit with themselves.
We can also have the treasurer monitor that, so that if it did start to look significant, I can always adjust that.
Well, we didn't hear a number, but what the amount of franchise taxes would be based on what's going to banks now. We got just a ballpark based on where money seems to be going now, the vast majority of which are not going to Vermont community banks anyway.
Yes.
But they're going to out-of-state banks, and those out-of-state banks though are paying, as I understand it, still franchise tax.
Yes.
And so there's tax revenue coming, but the tax revenue is not coming from Vermont-based institutions. If I heard the treasurer correctly.
But Vermont transaction.
No,
Mandate, we put them on the
Right,
credit unions.
right.
This would mandate that the credit unions get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the competition is
We had the
Chairs.
treasurer back
Yeah.
for a more quiet, detailed information. I didn't plan to take up this afternoon in a pitch on downtown tax credits. I just wanted to get on the record that banks do invest in the communities, by buying those taxes.
And those institutions that are subject to that bank franchise tax, you get a credit for the investment purchases that they make.
Yes, you know, yes.
But while we have you in the witness chair, Joe, I mean, basically, as an entity like the treasurer's office is making their decision, credit unions who could make a pitch for, okay, you're not getting this, $100,000 tax benefit, but, if you invest with us, we're able to make X number of loans to first generation home buyers. They can create an attractive package that helps Vermonters and pitch it to the entities that make the decision.
They could, but they have to follow the same fiduciary
Of course.
rules
That's right.
that banks
Yeah.
do. They can't, right?
And remember, there's nothing in this legislation that is telling the treasurer where to deposit state funds. The treasurer could decide, regardless of what happens here, I don't want to invest any dollars in state institutions in Vermont, or I want to put it all in this one, right? Whatever.
But that competition could still engender more benefits.
The point you just made is why there was a narrower carve out for opportunity credit union, is that they narrowed it to a credit union that was focused on community and economic development. Now I'm concerned with broadening it to credit unions to have assurances that this is actually benefiting some of these other statewide policies.
A lot of credit unions still function the same way.
Every credit union is limited to doing business in the neighborhoods, communities, the footprint in which it exists. You can't have a credit union that is chartered in Vermont, that is comprised of, let's say everybody lives in Washington. They're not going to be making investments in some development project in Florida. and so on and so forth. So they are limited to doing business with the people
Right.
and members of that credit union, which are gonna be within that field of membership. Granted, some are very narrowly defined. It used to be, as I said, employees of ABC Company. Some are everybody in the state of Vermont. Remember, Vermont's a pretty small state.
With the credit unions, you could still get that same shifting of resources that the Community Investment Act is trying to
Yeah.
hedge against.
Oh,
So I mean, if you have a big, large statewide credit union with a full field of membership, that they start concentrating some of the revenues in one part of the state and not the others, then we're not getting those more focalized reinvestments. I don't know.
why would we do that?
Well, if they did that, they'd be accountable to their members
Right.
who are spread around the state, so.
Right, I mean, I'm a data point of one, but I've worked with opportunities, I'm New England Federal, Vermont, federal, and they reduce their, overdraft fees voluntarily. You can call someone and reach them on the phone and, get information about your account. You can get a meeting where you cannot get a meeting with a private bank for a small loan. They're constantly offering financially responsible access to capital and making it a lot easier for people who are not usually bankable or able to access capital. And I think that's a huge benefit, but happens because they're domiciled in Vermont and have local people who pick up the phone.
All credit unions, not just opportunities.
New England Federal is great about this, and I didn't even realize they got.
So along this discussion, one more thing that I'll throw out to you is that, nationwide, we in credit industry have had a lot of discussion about banking and banking generically, as a term, banking deserts around the country. And so, in Vermont, a lot smaller states, a lot smaller areas, but, our small example of that is it, I think there are, I'm kind of blank on which ones exactly, but, 3 small communities, out in the countryside, that existing financial institutions left. And, just couldn't justify doing business there anymore. So North Country Federal Credit Union, Burlington or South Burlington based credit union, but they're federal. But they are one of the larger credit unions in the state, and they have planted branches in those locations. They were approached, many financial institutions, banks and credit unions were approached by town elders and so on and so forth, saying, can you please put a financial institution with me, because there's none here now. And North Country Credit Union was the one that ended up saying, sure, we will do that for you, buddy. So in the past couple of years, I think we've
Right.
got 3 branches out.
They usually do the zero interest energy loans, they're constantly working with our financial tools that we try to make available.
Okay, but I think we're getting a little bit off the top. Tomorrow I will have I think tomorrow we've got dispatch, but I'll have the treasurer in after, I don't know, I think,
The Department of Financial Regulation, can we do bank lifetime on your schedule? That copy?
Chairs.
Treasurer's office is not.
okay, who was coming in on,
The Department of Financial Regulation, but that is regarding something different.
yeah, they were in today to talk about.
Yeah, but you also wanted them to talk about surety bonds and insurance regarding Senator McDonald's bill about subcontractors.
Oh, okay. All right, so I'll see if the treasurer can come back and do this. I will have the drafter, we've got Maria on, I'll do this. We've got Maria on Thursday. We've had trouble getting her. So I'll have Maria in. She's gonna do the community media, public broadcasting. I've asked for, we've had some testimony that there's a legal challenge to what this is doing. We could be violating federal law, so I'm gonna have Maria come in and give us a legal opinion. And then we will put the treasurer on and we can have Maria go over, I believe she was the drafter of this bill, I'll double check. And have her come in. And if anybody else wants anybody else to come in and testify, but I think it's time we,
It says Royal up there, so I think it is Marie.
yeah, I think she does banking and I looked it up at one point, but I believe it is Maria. And, we will see what we will do.
Maria's also doing a walkthrough of 199 right after what she's already on the schedule for.
Oh,
You asked them to do that like 2 hours ago.
okay,
It's not on
so
the
it's
schedule.
not on this one. Okay, that's right. That's okay. Yes, we may have to tighten her up. Because 199 is the credit union not credit union, CUD merger and bill, and I'd like to, the credit unions are coming in, so I'd like to take that bill up while we're thinking about credit unions. And then see what we do. There's a section in there of public records, and I intend to ask to send that over to GovOps. Because we have never done public records in here and have no expertise. They do it. Oh, and we got the insurance bill today, it's the House bill, and we capped the insurance. We had a quick, we get through about half of it. We will get through all of it. I assume it will be a quick walkthrough. That I'll report it unless I have volunteers, but that came today, and that's one we can probably get out of here fairly quickly. Because we are going to spend a lot of time on property tax. They're doing things in the House as we speak. There doesn't seem to be an unpainful or easy solution, but they're working on a few with limiting the caps to schools most negatively impacted by the weights. And we'll see how that goes. I'll keep you posted. Budget Chairs meets tomorrow, so I'll probably get an update then, and I'll get one and see where that goes. I think that's it.